Molly mentioned Empty Bowl, and I am not the only publisher of Empty Bowl. These two gentlemen are also the original publishers of Empty Bowl. Holly was published in Finn's anthology. Jim Bodine, the first time I tried to sell a copy of one of the Empty Bowl books, I met Jim Bodine in 1976, and when I look around the room, I see most of you were not even born then. And Jim published a book, and Robert published some poems with Empty Bowl, and Chuck Easton published some poems with Empty Bowl. I don't know if I'm leaving anybody out. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that. It was a great enterprise. Still keeps on going. Mike O'Connor revived it. But every now and then I hear things named Empty Bowl, and I just want to say, hey, wait a minute. We started this. I'd like to read a poem called Fieldstones, and it has several parts. And it reminded me, because there are so many parts, the first time I heard Robert Sun read in Anacortes, he said, I don't like those poems that have little numbers, so I'm going to ring a little bell. I don't have a bell, so I want to ring the bell inside your mind every time I get to the section here. Fieldstones. In hand they are the weight of eons, a heft the forearms tense against. Grit rubs away the fingerprint. Mobs lug them up to piles. Gifts behind the plow. Pry up and bear the heavy ones for building stones. Lay foundations only after inventing the catapult. Thatch yielded to gossamer. Uncle gathered cobweb to bandage the split open skull. A brain enough to toss a rock. To bring back the hurt, I erect a wall of stone in tilth wild for buttercup. Under cleft stone, flat slate, blue, oval, schist, or sandstone crumble, green stained, the purplish worm disturbed. White sprouts have sprung, though crushed is their one way. To resent, you first define, on a ladder up a tower by the window with a knife in the air, the hanging pauses. Humiliation descends from its ape, approval, and fits perfect in our palms, hardened to stones, which we hurl. With half-pounds of blue darkness, how did the lightning get out? Wind up in pitch. The original strike was a domestic street fight, our side over theirs. I recall it now while the drum of my wheelbarrow rolls stones from its belly to build the shaky rim of a fire pit, interlocked circles on worn surfaces, tribal and weighty. Boys throwing rocks. Because of the stone martyrs, I stood provocative, hit twice only, light as stricken ducks, flight had robbed of wing. 3 stones lay on my chest, Orion's belt to the south, damp grass beneath me. They press, rib cage on backbone, lungs go flat, whisper, exile. Dense blue rocks, nostalgia, resentment, regret, hold my body to the earth. Stones lost in the stars by the first hurler. Take a stone and break a banker's window. Put your stones in piles. Bank them in a hill under roots in case the slaves begin to stir. Break a window, kick a door. Field stones lugged from county dirt. Bucketsfuls gouged in the street. Propaganda's rebel stone. Let your stone know your rage, hopeless rage. Tear up your meek serf mask. Take a stone and break a banker's jaguar. Take your stones to the movies. Drop a moss-loved boulder into every seat. Lug rocks to church and fill the pews. Leave one big enough to wobble a shopping cart. Take 2 stones in hand and stand before the White House. I remember what Nietzsche said was the birth of the good. Resentment on both sides of slave-master masquerade. Pick up a stone and show you mean it, slave of pharaohs, chauffeur at the civil rights parade. When Letitia let me know the diagnosis, her hand sweeping the pain, a fear of something wrong, unnamed, and not to pass her English class, I was that brute, her teacher, with stacks of essays still to grade before the summer burned its mist from off the surface of the lake. A 15-year-old who mustn't mar Maestro's slick and awesome polish. In one who knows 3 tongues, the master race, Castilian, rugged-voiced Indio, and English, a revolt against her fear of white walls and vicious specialists who tell her something's wrong inside might mean the dust from fields inhaled through decades now of lost migration seed inside her a ragged sack of bone. Tomorrow when I sip the honey tea, I'll have forgotten her jagged tear, spilt on dust, recall wrongly the harsh set of my jaw. But now, scorched by daylight, I crawl through shattered bottles to drop this token in a ditch her frail Oaxacan workers dug, their bleeding fingers stained on mounds of stone. And so I flung my childish arsenal. Heaven wasn't safe. Scrolls of hateful myths, weary with silver salvations, boxed by mechanics of stars. The tragic in 3-legged geometries. Scorpio rises, Orion's shortened sword, lost distorted Cassiopeia, the bear disgraced to extinction. Fueled by the lie of the hummingbird, I bark in cold sleep as dawn disgorges my one dimension. Trudge to the derelict factory, a crippled god, and fabricate more nothing out of nothing. Shoveling. I'm 5. She's angry. Whether with me or not with me, cursed be the boy in cowboy pajamas who shines the ceiling with his quivering flashlight. I have frozen her in white cocktail, waitress, skirt, and blouse, nylons and heels, bent to the heavy shovel she clanks in the coal chute while I brighten the cave. Flame escapes the iron door, God's golden claw. Yesterday I saw the pictures of Turkmenistan's Darvaza well, the Soviet failure burning since 1971. Despite night sweats and visions, here Dante would have descended out of love. Out of love, my father, fingers caging a shot glass, calculates how to tell her he is wronged by the work she does for tips from drunks with sideburns. The moles of his eyes emerge to gather my childhood. Then he descends like dirt down that torched well, 100 meters wide. What diamond is his mind? After freeze tag on Annabelle Street, her coal fire kept us safe. Stop. I have frozen us all. The planet didn't ricochet. No oil spill rings the moon. Nothing's changed. I am it. And one more coals. The builder called a home organic and banned us from remodeling. Home, he says, is a system tangled in systems, and lots more hip metaphor for all the rooms we occupy, we, the 7 billion remodelers. And that's only humans. How many ants and elephants? What weeds shoulder through pavement? The year began at a railroad crossing, and I was happy, uplifted by my resolution. Stand up more. Science, our tool to fix cluttered wiring, plumbing, to learn balance, says, stand, you will live longer. Then a mile of coal cars, a recitative, rolled its dirge downtown. I felt that twinge grind inside. Hard to imagine, we spent a half millennium dragging our primate's bludgeon. It echoes in my skull. I call it fear. I walk those tracks uphill, stepping and singing on the shoulders of the world. Tapped my doorframe into place, and I was home. That's all.
Up again, just serendipitously on some of the things in Michael's wonderful reading. I'm going to start with a poem. I'll be teaching this summer at a writers' conference called Fish Trap down in Oregon in the Wallowas. It's a wonderful conference in a beautiful area. I taught there in 2010, and Gary Snyder was the keynote who came for the gathering. And I've met him years ago working in Alaska, and so it was really wonderful to see him again, and he gave a wonderful reading. But at one point, this gets back to my introduction that Molly gave, I had the opportunity to either have lunch with Gary or take his dog for a walk. And I went for the dog. Because I knew that a lot of people would be at lunch, and I was really missing my dog Fox. I'd been away for a week, and I thought, okay. So, this is called Walking Gary Snyder's Dog. I hadn't imagined a poodle for this poet. A working dog, perhaps, like a border collie, a shepherd, or even a husky. But she's a standard poodle, compact, wiry, and smart, like him. And right now, she's ready to run. She pulls me up the street, past the arcade with fake putting greens, past the colliding bumper cars, past the Slurpees and snow cones, past the kids licking soft serve. She's tracking a scent, races from bush to bush, sniff and pee, lifts her handsome
bed. And I think my mother rightfully realized that she'd probably overdone it. So one day when the coalman came and I was huddling out of the bed, she coaxed me out and took me by the hand and took me out to meet the coalman to show me that these were really nice hands. And the coalmen had dark, coal-sooted overalls, and this one guy had kind of a 2 or 3 day stubble, block, coal dust all over, and black gloves. She brought me out to him, and he reached down and picked me up, and he said, "So, you want to go work in the coal mine?" He had told him the story. So I walloped him. I was probably only 4 or 5. I just hauled back and hit him as hard as I could. And he put me down, and I took off. It unfolded from there. I still remember it very vividly. So no cold story, or no cold poems, but I thought I'd read a couple of poems for my daughter. They're from a little chapter called Some Ducks. I'll read that title poem, but first I want to read this little poem called Wild Animals that I really love. It's also Caitlin's favorite poem in the book as well.
Mine too.
Finn's too. Wild Animals. Dinner over just past dark, and my daughter refuses to carry out the compost. There's wild animals out there. That's nonsense, I say, grabbing the pail and purposely leaving the flashlight behind. Past the porch light, total darkness. Then, just beside me, a deer startles and jumps noisily into the brush. A dozen steps later, heart still hammering, I lean to tip the pail, and a low, toothy snarl rises from darkness a foot away. I'm halfway back to the house, compost scattered before I realize, raccoon. Christ, as the kitchen door slams behind me. There's wild animals out there. And this next one is, this is the title poem, Some Ducks, and this happened nearby as well. little pond across the way, some ducks. Now, if we're real, oh, and the poem takes place between a pause and two clauses of a sentence. Prolonged pause. Now, if we're real quiet, I whisper to Caitlin, and with the next step, a thunder of wings fills the sky, cloudburst of feathers and spray as dozens of mallards explode from the small pond. Blue-white shimmer of wing bars and vapor billows across the winter sky. Caitlin stands frozen as a second, then third wave erupts before us, astonished that our quiet approach could trigger such spectacular alarm. The roiled surface splashes up in waves over the shore ice, the din of wing beats fades, and the sky is suddenly monumental in its emptiness. Our eyes meet with my unfinished thought. We might see some ducks. And I think I'll read one more of this, and then a couple of newer ones. This is called Divers, and this was written when my daughter's on a diving team, high school diving team, and so there was a lot of practices. And just going to take up when you arrive early, and so dads and stuff. And wait for them. This one was a meet somewhere, and before practice, they were walking on their hands, just to limber up, walking on their hands along the far side of the pool, and the reflections were in the pool and created these magical creatures. It was quite nice, divers. Before practice, Before practice, the divers walk on their hands along the far edge of the pool. Their reflections in the still blue water merge with their actual selves, palm to palm, hand-stepping delicately along the curb like mythic creatures, half liquid, half vapor, long-limbed and angelic, feeling their way along the verge of earthly elements. In minutes, they will hurl themselves swan-like through the unhurried air, spin like tumbler pigeons, and rip the clear surface water, sleek and powerful as dolphins. But now, as the girls move delicately as water striders, bound neither by earth nor gravity nor time, they are most themselves, balanced and playful in the grace of their bodies. They are masters of colliding elements, handwalkers on the liquid lip of the possible, acrobats of the air who have yet to show us how much can be accomplished in a few brief seconds of flight. My colleague, I'm just finishing up a manuscript. I just finished a manuscript of poems, a larger collection of poems this week. And so I wanted to read just two things from that. I'll read the title poem. It's called Ascendance, and it's from a historic photograph by a Northwest photographer, Eastside Washington photographer named Ellis Morrigue, and it's a photograph of a salmon climbing Kettle Falls before Kettle Falls was drowned beneath Roosevelt Lake behind Grand Coulee. When a wild Chinook thrashes the air above Kettle Falls, the coiled spring of its body ripples with the surge of 700 river miles toward home. The river pours its thunder between striate sea-bottom rocks, a glassy tongue imploding into whiteness. To the salmon, it is a beckoning arm. There is no human gesture so fervent this long journey inland, no effort so seamlessly one with its element. The river's story, descending through epochs of ice and stone, coalesces in the salmon's momentary flight. The salmon's heart is the river's heart made flesh. The salmon's pulse, the salmon's flight, a pulse. Ours is the wisdom to see them both as one, power to power joined, one fallen, one born by a wisdom all its own in ascendance. And wanted to dedicate that to the freeing of the Elwha River, which is nearing its completion. Nearing its completion with the upper dam being totally taken out, I think by this summer, but already the lower dam is gone and salmon are swimming. They did not have to take long to figure it out. And so I wanted to finish this with, this poem, Sheep Canyon. A number of old friends are here, among them Randy Godfrey, and this is a poem I wrote for Randy and his daughter Robin when we were exploring the Escalante Canyon some years ago out in the Southwest. We followed cougar tracks over wet sandbars, up the copper green flow of the Escalante. Wherever we crossed, she crossed, and we came to look forward to the neat round prints dimpled with yesterday's rain. Above camp that night at Sheep Canyon, Randy found the den. Deep cave beneath a large sandstone boulder, blue-black with lichen. It faced east for early sun and was pitched to shelter from stiff down canyon winds. Its sandy floor, well below the sloping hillside, was strewn with bones, jawbones, femurs, bits of rib and scattered vertebrae. A deer skull with spread four-point antlers, silvery dry on the dark sand. I stayed there until the sun sank through a notch in the sandstone cliffs and disappeared. The night grew cold and starry. Moonlight traced the rim of the far canyon wall. My own bones bundled safely into warm clothes on a wide, flat rock by the river. I had almost forgotten what it felt like to be alive.
So one more round? Is this it?
Is it? I think, right?
Yeah, this is it.
You can count, Finn.
I think I'll read just a couple more of these love poems, and then I'll finish off with a couple freight train poems. I want to read, Tim talked about that one for Robert, so I'll read it first. I'll read it. This is called Close Enough. I never did find out how you ended up at Ann's, but there you were. Cold black hair and eyes so green they seemed beyond any reasonable beauty. I was 16, a runaway, trying to stay out of the way of the law. You were running too, from a brutal husband somewhere in Colorado. We spent days together, walking the bridges of Big Cottonwood Canyon and the horse show in Draper, sitting in the bleachers, sipping from your smuggled bottle, watching the ponies canter by, watching my green heart ripen. You were my first real woman, the first to hear me, the first to begin the untangling of love's unfathomable knots. Like everything in those turbulent times, one day you were gone. The only thing left of you, a tender note saying goodbye. I still don't know if it was love or the inevitable longing that trails after it. It was close enough, though. If I'd had the chance, I would have dropped to my knees and begged. And this is the one that Tim was talking about called Spare Change, which sort of is the same line. So a little homage to Robert. Your little poems I've collected are beginning to add up. 4 lines a nickel, 6 lines a dime, an honest mistake turned into mountains, a shiny 50-cent piece. Suddenly, and without warning, the soul steps forth, pockets full, headed for the liquor store. And one more, this is a little poem, it's called Love Poem with Jerry in it. It's the co-author of working in the woods, working in the sea, came over to my house, and when I had all these poems strewn out, trying to figure out what to do with them, and Jerry came in and said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I got a bunch of love poems that I'm trying to put together." And he goes, "Well, at least I know I won't be in there." So I wrote this poem called Love Poem with Jerry. I finished the poem and read it to you. This is for, by the way, for Pat, my wife. I finished the poem and read it to you. I see in your eyes a tear beginning. It's beautiful, you say, maybe one of your best. But you love all my poems. How can I trust someone who'd take a bullet for me? You roll your eyes. Show it to Jerry then. But he loves me too. Maybe I'll read a couple freight train poems and then call it good. This one's called The Boneyards. By the way, I rode the freight trains for years, and this was the result of it. My friend Steve Johnson and I, who's a fantastic photographer, we, in the early 80s, we did a bunch of trips together and decided to do this book. The Boneyards. We camp by an abandoned warehouse just outside the city limits of Mason City, Iowa. The fire is nearly out, and my partner's asleep. I throw the last wood pallet on the burning coals and lean against a pile of bricks. The derelict factory looms above our camp in the crackling light. Another clear night in the boneyards of America. The smell of rusting steel and forgotten men mingled in the wild starlight. I roll out blankets between sleeping tramps, finish off what wine is left, and listen to far-off dogs sing their songs to one another. The dark landscape lifts and falls with a sigh, and all the iron and concrete heaped into order can't keep these single blades of grass from breaking through back into the world.
A new kind of nature poem.
Yeah.
I throw another pallet onto the coals and lean back on a pile of bricks. Bricks are off the level.
Let's see. Here's one called Deep. Our train moves slow as an old Chinaman's bow past an ancient derail. The engineer blows his whistle straight through the roaring darkness in homage to the spirits that live here. I shift positions on the boxcar floor, wrap up tight in the dirty sleeping bag, and think of poor Odysseus and his singing sirens. It's late. The night has eaten what moon there was. But later, on those dead and twisted freight cars, the misty galaxies will shine like frost in the freezing night. Let's see here. I should think about these things for a minute. Oh, dumpster dinner. Dumpster dinner. First, there are the greens. Always lots of greens. And a few onions right on top. They're easy. Then dig a little deeper past loaves of turquoise bread and the smell of souring milk until you hit cheese. And look, there's more. 2 good tomatoes, a bunch of carrots, and a full bag of donuts. Now load what you can in a sack and beat it back to the jungle. The dumpster dinner cooks in the pale moonlight. The dumpster dinner steams with what you find. And any tramp will tell you, garbage always tastes better when cooked outside. Let's see. A couple of little ones on this one. So I'll read this one, then I'll end with a couple little ones, and I'll call it good. It's called The Midnight Ghost. It's kind of a little memory poem for Kerouac. All day we waited. All day we waited for that run along the sea, LA to San Francisco on the hot shot freight called the Midnight Ghost. The hobos named her this for her elusive nature. Leaves with a setting sun, planting roses across the dark Pacific. Then flies all night through blowing fog. That ribbon of steel, that feathery shore of moonlight on the breaking surf. This was your old run, my friend. The Midnight Ghost, the beat line, the spectacularest railroad you'd ever in your wildest little dreams want to ride. Like a kid's dream. Jack, sitting in a boxcar that night in San Luis Obispo, drinking with friends, I saw through foggy yard lights a cut of cars roll slowly past. The moan and squawk of wheels, like exotic beasts headed for extinction. And I thought then how your gentle stories helped find the back doors to America. And how sad to see new critics rob with ease the grave and blame the dead. But Jack, the Midnight Ghost still runs that stretch you love to ride, when boots rolled in a coat made a pillow, and your blood's only blanket was a poor boy of wine. And I'll just finish off with two little train poems that I wrote for. Okay. This one's called End of Contract. There are two small poems from my old friend Paul Townsend. 3 weeks working the woods, and we're finally headed home. When the crummy breaks down, end up in the freight yards, you and me, waiting on that southbound SP. Another step up in a long, lustrous career. And this one's called, let's finish with it. This one's called Silver Lining. Sure, we had to flap our arms and pace all night that frozen boxcar floor. And it's true, our teeth chattered like an old flat-wheeler. But on arrival, in the moonlit rail yards, an abandoned shopping cart with 3 good wheels pushed our burdensome packs the whole way home.
He did.
Yeah, that's a fast one you pulled.
See, keep you off balance.
Well, I'll finish with a love poem that's also a freight train. This is called Minot. This is also written for my wife. Walking down the train in Minot, North Dakota, tired and windburned from riding too long outside. Cursing Burlington Northern with each closed boxcar I pass, I throw my gear on the gravel ballast and sit in the shade of the train, heat sick and lonely for you. Last night I slept under shooting stars on a windy flat car and dreamed myself home. Dreamed I held your face in my hands by a moonlit sea and spoke so clearly of love, something wonderful bloomed out of all this sadness. I don't know why we live as we do. Our wifey's ghosts call my name from dusty boxcars that roll lost across America. I don't know why it is when I come home and feel you warm against cold sheets that none of it seems to matter anymore. It just doesn't seem to matter. Very nice.
Okay, this is a new poem that goes way back. It's called Willow Lights, comes from memories of my grandfather's farm. My grandfather used willow lights cut from a backyard shade tree to tie back his grapevines to their arbors. Leafy rows that bordered the other crops sown into the small hillside farm. With a bundle of cut swaths tucked in his belt, he strode the rows like a swashbuckler, whipping wands and binding unruly growth into order. Following along with my armload of cut willows, I could barely keep up. I did better with strawberries, scooching my butt down the dusty rows, filling my grandmother's big two-handled colander, the taste of ripe berries erupting warmly against my tongue. Scooching too, I could thin carrots with the best of them, grasping the lacy tops close to the soil and tugging. The small fingerling carrots, rinsed in the tub-like yard sink, crunched sweetly between my teeth. Other days I gathered brown eggs from the cloying hen house, or fed the rabbits in their shaded hutches, or broke the ends off string beans with Nunny under the backyard willow, her apron a brimming green horn of plenty, or watched plains of tomatoes ripening on wire mesh racks, smoke from the summer kitchen redolent in the fragrant air. The green willow withes dried over summer, and as the wine grapes thickened and set, and by September, when all the family gathered for harvest, their golden coils seemed an organic part of the vines, bound like memories now, with the farm gone, shoring up the bounty beneath yellowing leaves, so it can be gathered and pressed and tasted, setting the glass down on the white enamel table, tartness waking the tongue.
I just changed my mind about which poem to read. I'm hearing hymns. I'm going to read Making Green Tomato Jam.
All right.
Mid-October, and still I'm not ready to give up on my heirloom tomatoes. Too late to ripen this summer that broke all records for cool days. I kneel among them, take one last whiff of short-lived summer, twist each from its thin stem, their round green bodies hard in my palms, wash them, pack them dry, take the sharpest knife to chop them into shards, sad remnants of summer, strewn across the wood cutting board, sweep them into my best blue bowl, sprinkle with lemon juice, brown sugar, lavender, set them in the refrigerator. In the morning, set them to boiling, simmering, cooling, and repeat 8 hours later. We spoon the chunky, fragrant jam into sterilized jars, set them on the shelf in the pantry, listen for the ping, ping, ping of lids sealing, saying, now, it is time, you must let it go.
I'd like to read a poem from my wife. This is an elegy for her mom. She lost her mom about a year ago. And although it seems like not a good thing to end on an elegy, I think it's okay. Her name was Sandy, and Hurricane Sandy hit on her birthday. Elegy. 3 old men sing happy birthday to me, already a breakfast regular. Sandy had the waitress get them to sing. They don't know me, but remember buying rounds for drunks on their birthdays. Once pretty, now the waitress's cheeks wear the dust of a spidered windshield. She says the driver had a few, and pours a cup as the trucker in the booth sniffles behind newsprint. She's frisky for the geezers, one who lost a foot, one in shapely back brace. A third greets 2 new mothers at the door. Sandy would have asked them, but they never sang. So I lied. They didn't see me or sing, unless a hum to a shuttered dance inside a trap is celebration. 3 old men peer into a silk bag. An animal wriggles and lunges. When she was gone, we fed it generous scraps of mourning and bits of light. Coffee continues without her, without us, along with the dirty dishes. The breeze along my cheek returns, but not for me. The shimmer of me reflected in the window is only morning light. Grass still muscles through the pavement. Flowers throw off their morbid scent. And compassion has no religion. You'll freeze, my mother's sister admonished, as a little man hobbled uphill in her mother's winter coat. She brought home the homeless, the beat-ups, she brought them back. Her daughter, my wife, brings them back, addicts, the maimed and unforgiven. Her mother answered with this gift: doves scattered by a bell, wings rescued in photos, but honey, I have you.
Now let's give the poets another hand.